It's aggressive, but that's part of the point. Is that if you don't put a number out there, if you don't put a target out there, the chances of you reaching that are slim to none.
You're listening to Going Deep with Aaron Watson. You're going deep.
JD, welcome back to Going Deep with Aaron Watson.
Aaron, good to be with you again.
So we left things off at the kind of 20-year trajectory that you went on from being the sole person responsible for the wholesaling business within the framework of your family business, up through the sale of the business, buying it back from the investors who had the company kind of strapped together and had gone bankrupt, but you kind of saw a vision for how it could be, sliced up and rethought. So we're going to obviously link to the first interview that you did on the show to give that background for people who missed it or want to sink their teeth into it more. But to just paint a picture from a starting point, where was the business at that point in time? And when you kind of took catalog of everything, what was compelling to you about the pieces that might have been misaligned?
The business at that time was in shambles from a customer satisfaction standpoint because we were not able to buy inventory. We were not able to get inventory to ship to our customers. So we had fragmented inventory where, we sell modular desking. So you have a main part of the desk, a return, pedestals, and then maybe a hutch. And we may have had 4 of those 6 pieces in any of the colors that we stock. So we could not ship a complete desk. Someone wanted 4 desks to sell to their customer that needed them for new employees to start. We couldn't do it.
Wow.
And it was that way for about 6 months, up to the end where the bankruptcy actually happened. So that was the one challenge, was could we overcome customer dissatisfaction when we restarted the business after buying it back. And one of the things that we were successful with is working with our suppliers to get immediate access to available inventory that would allow us to change that customer experience from day one. So that was the biggest piece, where we had the ability to fill orders and orders that had been in the system of the old company that were still valid. Customers still needed it because they couldn't get it anywhere else, and we were able to fulfill those orders on day one. So immediately we became a hero and a company that people like to do business with again, because we were able to do what we said we were always able to do, but then we couldn't.
Yeah.
So that was probably the biggest piece to it, is having inventory available to fulfill customer demands. And the overall challenge for us, really, after we got started, was keeping up with demand. One of the most interesting things for me was, for the first time in my career, and I had been at it for 24 years at that point, was creating a business plan. I never had to create a business plan because the business was always operating that I was working in. So here was starting out from scratch, basically, and I had to go to the bank and get financing, because to buy inventory you need cash, and we weren't selling anything, so we didn't have any cash. And the business plan that I put together was a 3-year plan, and at the end of that 3 years, we expected to be around $10 million in revenue.
Okay.
Year 1, we ended at $9 million. Year 2, we ended at 18. Year 3, we were at $24 million.
Made the bankers happy?
Yeah, because we needed more money to keep up with that growth, and that was one of the most satisfying, but one of the most challenging and unexpected things that came out of it, is just how quickly we grew. But that opened up significantly larger opportunities for us because of the fast growth, and we were able to really do different things than we had expected.
As you try to piece that apart and think about the demand for your services, your products, to what do you attribute that? Because in one vein, it's like, I don't know if there's necessarily like more offices or more office space or greater like total addressable market demand for this furniture. Now, granted, some of your competitors had been part of that roll up and then part of the thing going bankrupt. So I'd imagine that's a part of it. But how else do you make sense of that?
we've been asked that question a ton. How have you why are you growing? Why are you growing faster than the market? And how have you been able to sustain that growth in an industry that simply isn't growing much more than low single digits on an annual basis? And it comes down to people, products, and service. So our people, our employees, our team members really are good at what they do. And we give them as much support as we possibly can for them to get better at what they're doing. And the products, our product selection process and the products that we bring to market are in a very commoditized industry and channel, are somewhat differentiated from the crowd. And that has set us apart from our competitors in the way that our customers look at us. And we were at, I was not there personally, but just earlier this week, we were at one of the largest resellers in the country, and they told us that they can't get what we provide them anywhere else from any of our other competitors, from their main suppliers. They can't get what we provide, which is a broad product selection with deep stock and immediate delivery. And so that's the service side of it, is that we've got the right people, we've got the right products, but can you get it to market? And I think we do that better than any of our competitors across multiple geographies. And with our recent expansion into the Texas market with our Houston distribution center, that only enhances that ability to service customers really nationwide at this point.
So expanding your geographic footprint, but then also expanding this physical location, you more than doubled in size for your square footage for being able to stock here. That's a huge part of a differentiated service experience for the clients that you work with.
Sure, because we can achieve that 20 to 30% annual growth pretty seamlessly. And there's chaos that happens every day in every business, and when you're growing at 25, 30, 35%, that chaos is enhanced, and not necessarily in a good way, but the ability to continue to expand our physical locations and our geographic footprint allows us to really seamlessly to the market, customer facing, achieve that growth without much of a hiccup. And I think that's critical for any business. If you're growing fast, that's exciting. But if you're growing fast and unable to maintain a service level that your customers have come to expect from you, that can lead to problems that aren't necessarily visible right away. And we've done we've had our ups and downs for sure, but I would say over the last 2 to 3 years, we've really done a good job as we've really aggressively grown in the market of maintaining that service level. And because of our the quality of our employees and the connection we have with them throughout the organization, and even to the point of the connection with customers, have been able to get visibility on problems that create challenges much earlier than I can recall in the past, where the speed of information that's not necessarily great information sometimes doesn't get to where it needs to go to solve a problem. And we've gotten really good at getting that information where it needs to go, identifying the problem, and really jumping in and fixing it.
Can you paint an example of that with specificity for a time where that happened in recent memory?
Product delivery. And one of the emails that I was looking at just before we started the podcast here is we've got a client in the Midwest, and immediately communicated with our rep, hey, we're having problems with your delivery getting here when it's expected. So everybody in the company is aware of that within minutes, and it'll be solved by the end of the day, as opposed to lingering on. And the other side of that is that we all care about it, and it matters to us, as opposed to, well, it's just a one-off problem, don't worry about it. And then a week later, a month later, there's 10 of those problems, and then you've got a fire that's raging out of control.
Yeah. And I feel like we were talking before this started about my company Piper and how we're still in these kind of like early nascent stages. But one of the things I've already come to realize is in a lot of instances, it's not necessarily about batting 1,000 or being absolutely perfect in every element of your execution, but wrapping whatever high level execution that you and standard that you hold yourself and your team to, wrapping that in that way of communicating with the client and letting them know that you've got it under control and that there is transparency into the process is really what people are, how you get a long-term client and someone that does business with you for a long period of time. Really, that is the thing that you're pursuing more so than some ideal of perfection.
I would agree, without a doubt. And the reality is, no matter how good you or any of your competitors are in whatever space you're in, everybody's going to have a problem. Something's going to go wrong. And it's really how you react to that problem, that thing that went wrong. And that's what the customer is going to remember, because they expect everything to be perfect, right? That's the expectation, is that there won't be anything wrong. When something goes wrong, they're going to remember how that was solved and what you did, were you compassionate? Were you empathetic? Were you did you take responsibility and take the right action to solve their problem? Because when a problem goes wrong, you as the business have a problem, but the bigger issue in that is that your client has a problem. And that's the bigger piece of it, right?
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that are paying the bills. They're the ones that have a choice to do business with you or not. And if the solution that you provide only solves the problem for you and not for your client, then that's not a solution. So being able to, with transparency, share with the client what happened, why it won't happen again, and make sure that there's follow-up there, that it doesn't happen again. If it does, you're on top of it once more. So being able to take responsibility for it and solve the client's problem and move on from there, and making sure that they're aware that you care, and what you're doing is going to make it better for them.
Yeah. So when we talk about the rate of growth and we talk about exceeding the business plan that you put in place, do you still, I guess the thing that I was really thinking about talking with you about as we were driving up here was planning in general. So you put the business plan together, your sales exceed that. We just had the start of a new year, the start of 2020, and there's planning that goes into, we want to invest in this, we want to make sure we complete this project and that project, but how seriously or how narrowly do you think about projections or planning as it pertains to, this is where I see our revenue getting, or, maybe like an up or a downward kind of range for how you think about the business as it continues to grow?
So that's something that we've really worked on over the last 2 years, and it continues to evolve. And we were successful in putting together a 36-month cash flow projection for the first time,
Okay.
month by month. So that was the goal coming into January of 2020, that we would have a framework and a really tight structure of what we expected the business to do. And it's based on historic knowledge and what we've been able to achieve leading up to that. So we plug those things in. We look at the market, we look at the competitors, we look at where we're going, what our growth is geographically and what that means, and tie all those different things in, and create a plan and a budget. And it's more than just a budget, but it's what we're operating to, and we're going to track that month by month. And if we exceed it, we'll adjust as the next 35 months or the next 32, whatever time frame that is, so that everybody understands what the goals are and what we're operating to. And it's aggressive, but that's part of the point. Is that if you don't put a number out there, if you don't put a target out there, the chances of you reaching that are slim to none.
Yeah.
And the more structure you can put around that, the better opportunity you have, A, to achieve it, B, to correct if you don't, because very clearly what the expectations were. And the more detailed you have there, and this is the most detailed we've ever been, you can identify what created the hit or the miss, or exceeding it, hitting it dead on, or missing it.
Yeah.
And all of those things combined allows the operation to operate more smoothly, more transparently, and work on the next big thing, which is continued business growth, efficiencies within the business. So you're not scratching your head working for 2 weeks figuring out why we didn't hit January's numbers.
Yeah.
Immediately. and you can identify that.
So having worked on that now and done that now, is that something where you're like, man, we should have been doing this 5 years ago? Yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt. But that, 5 years ago we weren't ready for doing that. We weren't that mature of a company, particularly at the executive level, and we weren't as transparent throughout the organization at that time. So it's certainly a process, and it's one that we've accelerated over the last 2 years with transparency throughout the organization and education throughout the organization of how we're running the business, what the framework is that we're using, and sharing that with all employees. And that's going to continue to grow in what we share and how we share it, and the details that are there. And we're talking, shifted the conversation quite a bit in what we're talking about, but I think this is pretty important, is that what that allows an organization to do is that our executive team is 5 individuals. And really up until 2 years ago, it was those individuals that were, quote unquote, responsible for the health of the organization and making sure that it worked properly and it ran. And if it didn't, those 5 individuals had to figure out why. And there was probably, if we identified something at a lower level, somebody probably got called into an office and got spoken to, and probably not the nicest way, and they probably left scratching their head and said, well, this really wasn't my fault, but I guess I've got to take the blame for it because that's what they said. Yeah. Whereas today, what we've done is we've spread out the knowledge of how the business is supposed to run, what the drivers are to create success or lack thereof, and we've done that now to the managerial level. So instead of 5, we now have 15 to 20 that understand at a deeper level what is required to run the business. And we're not there yet to relinquish the executive team from really taking most of the responsibility, but we're much closer. And when that happens, the executive team then does not have to be directly involved in the day-to-day, how do we execute today to make tomorrow's numbers, so on and so forth. And that bigger picture opportunity becomes more prevalent for the executive team, because that next managerial level of folks throughout the organization, they know exactly what they have to do. They know exactly how to do it. Yeah. And if they don't get there, they know how to fix it. And only in the extreme cases does something escalate to the executive team level on a daily basis. That's the next goal for us, is to really get there and empower the folks that have the talent, have the knowledge to be able to just execute. And that empowering them to do that gives them confidence and gives them the ability to be better. For themselves, for the company, and for their colleagues.
And the capacity to trust more people with autonomy is how you scale. Like you said, you're up to 120 people now, adding 15 more. As you aspire to continue to build out the team, you can't have those single choke points of decision making and perspective. That has to be dispersed.
Exactly right. And the choke point's a good way to do it. Where's the bottleneck? Where's the organization choking and unable to operate smoothly, right? And it's typically that happens at the top. And the biggest reason why it happens at the top is because that's where the knowledge is. And unless that knowledge gets dispersed, that's where the chokehold's going to be. And that's a big restrictor in a lot of organizations. And we were guilty of it. And probably still to a certain extent, but we're significantly better than we were.
Yeah. So let's take it back 3 years into the business plan. You're at $28 million. In terms of maybe that would be a helpful lens, like as you just kind of talk through some of the subsequent steps, the different choke points that had to be addressed. One of them was, geographically, we got to open this other location. One of them was expanding the square footage here at this location. But can you kind of take us back there and help us understand some of the choke points that you were progressing through?
Sure, I'll do my best. So physical plant. Warehouses, distribution space, both in our Charlotte operation and here in Pennsylvania, continued to be problematic. And part of it was that we did not have that 3-year plan looking out and had an expectation as to where we were going to go. We were looking at 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year. So we did not have the facilities that we needed for where we were going to be in 3 years. And therefore, our Charlotte operation is a great example, is that we moved the facility. We had outlying warehouses, holding locations, because we did not have the room in the facility that we were in. And getting that facility moved into, and this was 3 years ago now. It'll be 3 years in August, where that facility moved from 70,000 to 170,000 square feet, and allowed us to really operate a lot more efficiently, and that was coincided with our growth into the Southwest, into that greater Texas market, which as that continued to grow, the choke point became Charlotte again, until we opened up the Houston Distribution Center this past October and freed Charlotte up from an operational logjam to operate more efficiently. So physical plant was a big one, and employees, really getting enough employees, and then understanding what talent we needed in the individual departments, and really getting an understanding of what that really meant, of what is the talent. Well, we need somebody to answer the phone and say, we have this amount in stock in this color. Well, no, we needed a lot of somebodies to really understand how to manage calls, to eliminate so many calls from escalating because they didn't have an answer. So that talent level within our customer service department has really developed and changed, and understanding that internally as to what we needed to do to create that opportunity for ourselves was a long learning process that we've really gotten significantly better at, and very comfortable with that now.
Have you signed off on every hire for COE, or has that been passed off at some point?
That was passed off. And
do you remember how many people it was when that happened?
Probably 25 to 30.
Gotcha.
Where
was that? I'd imagine that was tough.
No, that was one of the easier things, quite frankly.
Really?
Yeah, because hiring is not easy, and interviewing and that whole process was not, at least the way we were doing it then. Trusting someone to make the right decision was probably the tough piece, and I think that's what you're referring to. Yeah. So, and that's, we've gone through several iterations of what that looks like, and where we landed about a year and a half ago was really changing the entire methodology that we use to hire, and we use the top grading method now, which it is, I won't go into the details, but it's a very regimented interview process that has benchmarks throughout, and it's not interesting. I was talking to my son's girlfriend about the process she just went through and got offered a job, and she had one phone screen and one 30 to 45-minute face-to-face interview, and then got offered a job. And I said, that sounds like what we used to do.
Yeah.
Today, we would not even consider offering a job unless we've at least had minimum of 2 hours conversation with anyone, face-to-face.
That's part of the hire slow, fire fast analogy.
Yeah, exactly. So you figure out if there's a cultural fit both ways. You know, if you think someone's a cultural fit, but they don't, then that's going to be a bad hire. Right.
Yeah.
So it's mutual. So taking that time on the interview side, as much as people say, and I used to say it, we don't have time to sit through 2 or 3 interviews because we have so many other things to do.
Yeah.
But the number of unsuccessful hires that you make because you don't take that time is so inefficient and so frustrating, and you continue to do that same thing over and over. And again, we were guilty of it for a lot of years. We've changed that process, and we're really, really pleased. The last 3-4 managerial or higher level hires that we've made all went through that process, and they're all really A players.
Are most of the folks that you bring in having some kind of a background in logistics or retail, or kind of a wild mix of all directions?
All directions. You know, customer service is where we hire, and warehouse. Those are the 2 departments where we hire the most. Customer service requires a lot of knowledge about our products, but we're not hiring anyone from the industry because they're just not available in our market. Right?
Gotcha.
I mean, we're an hour outside of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of office furniture experienced people that are within a 20 to 30-minute drive of our location.
Yeah.
But what we are hiring are customer service experts that have worked in call centers, have had professional training, understand how to manage a call and eliminate the need for a call to be escalated after a minute or after 30 seconds. So finding those skills, the professional skills from a customer service perspective, is really what we look for, and then we train them on the product.
Gotcha.
From a warehouse material handling, we look for experience, machine certified, because that slows or really speeds up the learning curve. But handling office furniture is not a requirement. So it's really expertise in a specific area, but not within the industry.
Got it.
When you get to logistics and things like that, yes, we would be looking for logistics background for freight coordinators and things like that.
Right on. So geographic constraints, people constraints, any other constraints as you've grown?
Cash.
Cash.
If you're growing in an asset-heavy business, or it doesn't have to be asset-heavy. I was with some folks that grew a call center business, and it was all about, do we have enough cash to continue the growth and to fuel the growth? And in an asset-heavy business like ours, without inventory, as I explained at the beginning of our conversation today, you don't have a business. You don't have satisfied customers. So that continual need to have inventory, and really as you grow, you have to have more of it, burns cash.
Yeah.
So we invested almost twice as much in our inventory last year as we made in profit. So that equals cash burn.
Wow.
Yeah. So we have to fix that, or it becomes completely unsustainable. But and we've recognized that. And but the reality is that if you're a growing company, you have to have a good cash source, and you can generate it yourself. But if you're fueling the growth with that cash beyond what your cash that you're bringing in, you need that cash source.
So the only example that I really read about on that kind of topic was Shoe Dog, which is the story of Phil Knight and Nike. And every single time they'd sell out of their shoes, they'd literally throw every dollar that they could into the next order, because the returns to the greater economies of scale for a larger production run of shoes meant that the next set of shoes would be more profitable, but you're in this constant kind of process of turning over, reinvesting in inventory, turning over, reinvesting into inventory. One of the big things he talked about there was access to a line of credit, and this constant conversation with the bankers, putting them at ease, making sure that they understand the risk and the opportunity and what have you. I'm guessing you've had a similar experience to some degree?
Yes. This is a straightforward, easy, actual answer. And it's interesting when I share this the business story, the COE story with folks for the first time, and they're familiar with Shoe Dog.
Yeah.
The parallels there are very similar. And when I read it myself, after being recommended to, hey, I think you'd like this, that is very similar to what we've gone through.
Gotcha.
The goal is to get out of that merry-go-round of, that needing that cash all the time. And how do you do that? Well, you get smarter with your inventory. We don't, our goal is not to sell out of inventory and then order more. Our goal is to continually have that inventory on hand, because that eliminates the peaks and valleys of sales cycles. So getting better at that, identifying in a more successful way the right new products to add. And we've been very good at that, but maybe we've added too many products, and of the maybe 30% of our new products have been very successful. That means 70 haven't, and that's a drag on cash. It's a drag on physical space. It's all those things.
Yeah.
So,
would you say that that's in the same vein though as like the projection, the 35-month out projection you were talking about, where you hit a certain level of maturity, and now that's even like possible. Like we can consider that as a possibility. Whereas when it's just you by yourself driving the truck around, like that can't really even enter the equation. That's just not where the maturity of the business is.
Yeah. So there's knowing, being having enough smarts to recognize where you need to get better. That comes a conversation that we had while we were walking through the facility, of having other people that can complement you and really help grow the mindfulness of the business, and just the talent that you have. And a CFO that we hired in March brought this to very clear understanding of, hey, this can't continue to happen, or this is what it might look like.
Yeah.
And we weren't there, but the projection and the visibility of, hey, this is what could happen if we don't really start to look at this. So bringing the CFO in allowed us to get smarter and more focused on something that we realized was probably an issue. But to your point of when all of these other things were going on and sales are growing at 30%, does it really matter? And yes, it does.
Gotcha. Cool. Um, I'm so for me, I'm so hung up on like the planning thing. I want to go back to that if possible. So another part of that is the employee headcount expectation that you have for the continued growth. Um, I guess just my questions are in general, like what else have you learned about that? Because that's something that, we try to do that at our small scale and, kind of make general projections, but it really feels like we're throwing a dart to some degree, but your capacity to even say like, this is the headcount that we're going to need because of, this is how much square footage that we have to maintain in our warehouse. And these are the quantity of calls that we're getting from customer support. And we can anticipate that this percentage of folks tend to turn over from your employee base just because that's the way the world works. What else goes into that? What else, are you trying to project as you think about a new year or a 35-month, 36-month window?
So a lot of it is trial and error and getting better, but you have to start somewhere. So indicating that you're trying to do that in your small organization, getting started is the key. And you may be completely wrong, right? You may say, well, we're going to add 3 people, and you may end up adding 7. Is that bad? Not necessarily. But why did it happen? And understanding that, and then doing it again, not giving up because you didn't get it right, I think is critical. Because people can get frustrated and say that, well, it's not worth it. I wasn't right. It wasn't even close. Why would I do it again?
Yeah.
Well, you do it again because you'll get better, and you'll have a better opportunity to hit the mark. And that's kind of that's how we came to this 36-month cash flow projection, is that I recognized that we needed it, and I really challenged my CFO to get it done so that we could then start to look at it in a much more finite manner of, this is what it looked like for the month, and this is where we missed, this is where we hit, this is where we exceeded, and should we be adjusting? And without that, we'd be looking at it by the quarter and against a budget that was probably somewhat arbitrary, and that's where we were last year. So this is that next step, the next iteration, and 6 months from now, that 36, and it's a rolling 36 months, right? So 6 months from now, we'll still have a 36-month cash forecast. It'll it'll be more honed in than the one that we have right now. So really using historical information and learning as you go, and making sure that you're using as much of the data that you have as you possibly can, and talking to the market, talking to the employees, getting feedback, and understanding what outside forces that you really don't think about but can impact the business. For us, it's the general economy. And now, topically, we've got the coronavirus, which we have a lot of our factories are in the Pacific Rim, not China specifically, but the Pacific Rim. They're all on Chinese New Year. That Chinese New Year just got extended by 10 days.
Yeah.
That impacts our production, which we were counting on happening starting up next week. It's now a week and a half out. So that will impact our business, and that will impact that cash flow for March, April, May. So understanding those things and really using that information and making sure that you're pulling it all together, and continuing to do it. And I think that's the key is don't get frustrated, don't get upset because it was wrong. It's going to be wrong. You're not going to hit it 100%, particularly the first time or the second time. But the more you do it, the better you're going to be, the more comfortable you're going to be with it, and the more valuable it's going to become to the business.
So when we talk about some of these kind of longstanding clients that you guys have had and all these relationships that you're building, back to like the very beginning of this conversation, like we're able to deliver in a way that our competitors are not, which, solidifies our place in these relationships. I'd imagine there's also a degree to which, as your business becomes bigger and you start you traded your problems down here for the problems up here, and you're kind of coming to understand those better, it also makes you more empathic to your clients that you're serving because you better understand their business. Maybe if their business is larger than what you've built, you start to have a better sense of where their priorities are, how they're going to be operating just by the nature of the scale that they're at. Can you talk a little bit about that, like how your almost empathy for the clients that you're serving has grown through the lens of growing your own business?
Yes, and you're right. The more exposure that you have, the more you understand what your clients are feeling and where their pain points are. And we've used that a lot to make sure that we're running the business and offering the services that mean something. And we're going through that process right now of really identifying and solidifying what our brand promise to the market is going to be. And in order to hone in on those, we're going to be asking our customers, what is important to you? We have what we feel is valuable to our customers, but that doesn't mean that it is. And the last thing we want to do is go to market with a brand promise that is, just hollow to our clients. So that's the current example that we're dealing with right now of getting that customer feedback. And I think one of the advantages that we have for the wide scope of our customers, and they're from a single person, 2-person operation up to 1,000+ people working in an organization. That's what our customer base is. That we've been at that really entry level small business, knowing what you need to do to continue to be in operations, so we can empathize with the smaller size customers, just as we now can with the larger customers, because we've been there, and that's where we came from. So that's, I think, one of the key things that is important for us to not forget, is where we came from and how we got here, and remember that those 1 and 2 people organizations or 5 or 10 people organizations are really what allowed us to continue to grow, because that's where our success came from. And now, because of our national footprint and the ability to distribute on a national level, we're now servicing those customers that have that same scale and that same size. But that doesn't mean that they're the most important and the reason why we're successful today. And that's important for us to remember and not forget. So getting larger allows us to see and essentially learn how to better serve those larger customers, but not forgetting where we came from is critical for us to sustain the success that we have.
Yeah. Another thing that we talked about as we touched on as we were walking around your facility here is the concept of loneliness. And by definition, as you get bigger, there are fewer and fewer people, companies, characters that can relate to where you are, because it becomes more exceptional the larger you climb. And being named as one of the fastest growing companies on Inc., I think that's partially how we initially got connected. I saw the list there, but that's a exceedingly small category of folks that have led an organization at that level. Can you talk a little bit about how you've dealt with that, or the avenues that you've gone down to alleviate that feeling, as at times I'm sure it feels exceptionally lonely to be growing something like this?
Sure. I think one of the key components to that problem or opportunity, however you want to look at it, is to have the support at home and a spouse that understands it. And I'm in somewhat of a unique position, is that Melanie and I work together and have worked together for over 25 years.
Yeah.
So that adds to the plus and minus side of it, right? Is that there's no break for the most part. It's always there, because we're in the office together for most days, and we're at home together. So there's no clear break of when those things change. So that can be challenging, but it's mostly rewarding, and you have the ability to not be so lonely in a lot of cases. And the other piece to that is really a professional network of non-competing CEOs, presidents that you can have a conversation with and share what you're working on, what your challenges you're dealing with. And if you have the right group, you've got diversity that they can share their successes or their failures in very similar situations, and you can learn from that type of collaboration. And I've been fortunate to be a member of YPO, Young Presidents Organization here in Pittsburgh, for the last 5 years, and that's been really an immeasurable difference for me to have those types of conversations and those types of relationships. That being running a fast-growing company, there are stories that can be shared in completely different markets and whether that's geographic markets or just different products, different industries that all have very similar parallels.
Yeah.
And having that available to you is important and helpful.
Yeah, that's why I love doing the podcast, because we get to see some of those stories, and there's those timeless elements where we are talking about, it's all good, we are talking about, physical goods and office furniture and some of these specificities, but you're also talking about, sales and financing and recruiting and customer service and these timeless elements in any element of a business.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. So, anything else? I can't believe it's already been 45 minutes here talking with you, but anything else that you're hoping to share about the story of the kind of last 10 years of COE that we didn't get a chance to touch on?
I think one of the key components for us, and I've referenced the last 2 years several times, and that's really the timing of the change in my the way that I've led the organization and what I've focused on with the methodology that we're using, and that's where the 36-month cash flow projection really came from. And that methodology is Scaling Up, which is a book written by Vern Harnish, followed up from Rockefeller Habits. And 2 years ago, that's where I started to lead the organization of following that methodology of what we're doing. This is why. And this is how we're going to do it, and that's where the structure comes in, and we've shared that with the greater management group, and that's what I was referring to earlier, of really sharing how the business is going to be run, and there's a very clear picture of what to do and how to do it. But the other piece to this, and most importantly, has been the employee engagement and the way that we go about communicating with our employees and really treating them and valuing them as a true asset within the business, and making sure that we have the right employees in the right positions doing the right things. And that all started with a book club that I initiated 2 years ago this past fall. Becoming Your Best was the name of the book by Steven Schallenberger. And we're reading it now again for the fourth or fifth time. Because we've had so many new employees come in that haven't been a part of that.
Yeah.
So engaging with the employees in that manner. Our current book is The Power of Moments by Dan and Chip Heath, and we're doing that in conjunction with the Pittsburgh Penguins, which is another employee engagement piece that we started in September. We're the only official employee engagement partner of the Pittsburgh Penguins. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean that we're selling them office furniture, because we're not. They're not our client. They're not a client opportunity for us.
Yeah.
But it's, and we're not going to a bunch of hockey games either. It is truly engaging our employees with the Penguins organization in a number of different ways. And one of those ways is the book club, where we've got folks from the Penguins marketing and sales group reading a book, The Power of Moments, with employees from COE, and talking about that on 15 to 30-minute conference calls every 2 weeks about the 2 chapters that we read in those 2 weeks. Another engagement piece of the Penguins is our Warrior helmet. So in the Penguins locker room, they have a Penguins Warrior helmet that goes peer-to-peer, player-to-player after every game, and it's really recognizing the player that was not the 1, 2, or 3 star. It's the player that went to work on the ice. Right? He's digging pucks out of the boards. He's taking hits, giving hits, blocking pucks. And we've, through the Penguins' encouragement, transitioned a Warrior helmet here at COE, where every 2 weeks a COE employee recognizes another COE employee for doing things that need to be done for the business to be successful. And we have a game-worn Penguins helmet that gets passed off peer-to-peer every 2 weeks. And they, we just had one yesterday, and our assistant manager in Houston passed it off to our night shift loading supervisor here in Pennsylvania. And he recognized one of our core values in teamwork. And ironically, Shane, who received it from Lorenzo, Shane was traveling to Houston yesterday, and he's there now helping them continue to get better at what they're doing. So, really engaging the employees, valuing them, and giving them opportunities to do things that they wouldn't normally do anywhere, particularly at work. So there are game experiences for the employees, and if you're a recipient of the helmet, you'll get a game experience at the Penguins game with the group of employees as well. So really, it's about people and treating them like you would want to be treated yourself, and recognizing them for a job well done, and helping them in ways that maybe traditionally you wouldn't think of helping someone in the workplace.
I have to imagine that there's also a degree, and we've touched on it a couple of times in this conversation, of the thrill or the satisfaction of seeing the company values that you've built, or the kind of goals and aspirations and planning that you've put into place being implemented and embodied by team members, almost like without your presence there. It's not like, oh, the boss is watching, so let's like, put on the face, but it just is lived and embodied by the people that make up your organization.
Yeah, so I think that really for me is the most satisfying, is when that happens, and we see that and we recognize that. We have a wall of fame, and whether that's just an email from a customer taking the time to praise someone, whether it's from the warehouse or our customer service group or our accounting group, of someone really taking time out of their day to not complain, but to praise and recognize someone for doing something exceptional.
Yeah.
And those are the moments where it's clear that people are paying attention, and they value what is happening in the organization, and they really believe in it, they buy into it, and they want to embody it and promote it further. Kind of pay it forward type of thing. And you see that, and it's pretty special and pretty powerful.
It's a beautiful thing. JD, thank you for coming back on the podcast, for sharing so much of your time with us again and giving us the tour. Before we give you a chance to issue another challenge to the audience, I want to make sure that people can check out COE and all the digital coordinates you want them to check out. Links, where do you want to direct people's attention?
LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. There's more, but I'm not a huge social media person, but there are other opportunities to find out about us. Our websites, obviously, and we have several websites. We have a website for the brand, which is Office Source, and then we have a website for COE Distributing.
Perfect. We are going to link all of that in the show notes for this episode, just like we do for every single one. goingdeepwithaaron.com/podcast is a place to find it, or in the app. We're probably listening to this right now. But before we let you go, JD, I want to give you the mic once again to issue a challenge to the audience.
So the challenge is to really get engaged with your employees and coworkers, colleagues, and do something that is different than what you would expect to be done on the job. Engage with them, give them an opportunity from an ownership or boss perspective. Provide opportunities or an environment that is just not your traditional workplace, and that's what we've found to be the most valuable here, and we continue to see value in it, and it's fun.
Yeah,
and it's treating people right.
It's not hockey, but it's adjacent. So the Piper team went ice curling, which is
nice.
Way harder. Not that I expected it to be easy, but it was like significantly harder than I was like, yeah, I can probably like throw it on there. It was insanely hard, but we had a good team. It was team building, but also competition, so a little bit of trash talking as well. It was a good time.
We enjoy that here as well, of the competitive nature to what we do.
Yeah, totally.
That's really cool.
We just went deep with JD Ewing. Hope everyone out there has a fantastic day.